Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another Dokkan Battle animation analysis video. And ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be taking a look at the brand new Android 17 and 18. We got these guys teased last night, and we just got their animations. Well, I guess technically today. Yeah, today, the day that you are watching this video, if you're watching it on the first day, would be today when we got these guys' animations revealed. They actually have quite a bit of stuff in their animation kit. They are also very good from what I've heard. The translations just came out, so definitely let me know what you think of it in the comment section below. But we have some very interesting things to take a look at with the animations today. I definitely have some thoughts on these guys. Of course, as per usual, we are going to watch through them one time through, and then we will go through them at slow speed as well. We'll also do the side banner unit since it is present in these animations, and I gotta say, I certainly did not expect these three to get a unit in Dokkan of any kind, to be honest with you. But it is quite funny. I forget what their actual names are, these three characters, but it's like the fake Ribrianne squad, which is kind of funny that they even got a unit. But yeah, so for Android 17 and 18, obviously from the Tournament of Power, they have a intro animation, they have a super attack animation, they have a active skill animation, and they have a unit super attack animation, which is quite a bit of stuff, honestly, to their name. And there's the jump scare of Goku there, by the way. Also, as well, as I always like to mention in the beginning of these videos, I am by no means an animation professional or anything like that. I just look at Dokkan animations all the time, and I feel like I know what makes a pretty good Dokkan animation, well, good. Also, it is cool. They did do the funny Ribrianne scene for that. I definitely think that they could have done that a little bit better if it wasn't for the stinky sprites, unfortunately, because, I don't think that there's really much that they could have done otherwise, unfortunately. Now, I will say, before I obviously go through and kind of dissect these animations, these guys definitely suffer from the kind of lately monthly Dokkan Festival syndrome, unfortunately. It feels like the animations on a lot of these monthly Dokkan Fest units have been really lacking as of late. I am sure that a lot of you have noticed it, and I'm sure that a lot of you have probably heard me say that time and time again when it comes to these animation analysis videos, because I feel like a lot of the time recently, the animation quality for these monthly Dokkan Fest units has kind of suffered quite a bit in favor of making these cracked animations for the big anniversary units, which is kind of an interesting topic that I definitely like to cover maybe in either a stream or its own video of some kind at some point. But I digress. Let's go ahead and take a look at the animations in full. Now, starting us off, we have these three. I'm just going to call them the fake Ribrianne squad. That's just what I'm going to refer to them in this video as. So, I don't remember their actual names. Obviously, half the characters in the Tournament of Power, their names are said once and then they never say them again. So it'd be like that. We have a nice little zoom in shot of the three of them standing there, which is pretty cool. And then we do have a very interesting transition, right? This feels a little bit more like cinematic-esque of a transition rather than a usual super attack transition, but it goes from them standing on the mountain to just blurring over to the next scene, right? That definitely feels something that's a little bit more anime-esque of a scene change rather than my usual complaints of oh, they blurred the assets, because that's a little bit different. That's blurring it to change how the character is actually posed, whereas this is just moving on to the next scene in a different way than just cutting between. And honestly, I think it works pretty well. We have them start to glow pink, which looks pretty good. And then, of course, the little explosion of light, which I think is also pretty well done here. Dokkan's been doing pretty good about just nailing characters' effects and whatnot, so it doesn't surprise me that that was the case. And then, oh boy, we have all of the hearts on the screen there, which looks pretty funny, with them going up, and obviously all of the hearts in the background here, kind of spreading out past them, right, as you can see there, which also looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. And we, of course, have the little heart in the middle before it all kind of dissipates behind them. I think that whole animation is done really well. Ironically enough, I almost like these guys' animations. Maybe it's just because they're so silly, but I almost like these guys' animations more than I like 17 and 18, which is kind of funny to say. But we have the card art appear on the screen, and then of course with all the hearts in the background, right, we do have them form the black heart there to then throw at the enemy. I will say this animation is very, very simple, right, in terms of like the actual characters animations, right, in terms of what these guys do. I do like with this, right, the way that they kind of make it so that, and I'm sure this is probably how it was in the anime, right, they don't have to show the other two because they zoom into the fake Ribrianne, right, and obviously with him putting his hands down, right, they do this pretty well, I will say, right, they kind of animate the initial motion, and then they change from this to this where his hands just kind of come down. I think that works well enough, right, for obviously forming the heart in his hands. And then of course we get the animation, which I will say the black heart is actually animated incredibly well. All this smearing and whatnot, right, all the stretching and squashing looks super good, if I do say so myself. I'm actually really impressed with the effects on the black heart here. But yeah, very, very cool, and obviously crushes into the ground with the three of them standing there, and obviously like their little bits of fabric kind of flowing in the wind there with that compressing down on the enemy. Lots of great dust effects as well, the wind and stuff too. It's a very simple animation, but it gets the job done, and obviously when it comes to these side banner units, right, we're not necessarily grading them on the same scale that we are these Dokkan Fest units, right, but hydrate or dihydrate, baby. For what's here, right, I will say I do think it is very well done. And honestly, it's a very simple animation, and I think they're a perfect character to put as a side banner unit, especially with just like an animation like this that is just so simple to be able to represent like that, right? Definitely very, very well done. I do quite like that side banner unit a bit. Okay, so now we move on to the intro animation for the androids. Obviously, this is going to be very simple because all intros are pretty simple. This is a very interesting one, I will say, because they kind of do a thing where they focus on them both, and then occasionally they'll focus on one of them, right? So here's what I mean, right? If we go back to the beginning, right, we obviously have this initial focus on the two of them standing there, and we have Android 17 then cut in and kind of move his head a little bit. I will say, the one thing that does bother me about this is the way that his head stretches, right? If we take a look at his head moving here, right, it looks normal here with him closing his eyes. But then once we finally get to, let me see if I can get the exact frame. Yeah, here, his head gets like wider. I don't know if what they're trying to do is like have a little bit of rotoscoping at play there, right? And like that's the goal of what they're trying to have happen. But this looks so ugly to me personally. I don't know. I saw this animation. I noticed this the first time I watched it, and I was like, ugh, why does his head look like that? I don't know. Just very, very weird. But anyway, we have 17 talk a little bit, right? With both of them still just staying there, 18 looking at 17. And then, of course, we have the cut-in, right, after 17 is done talking, where it goes to Android 18's mouth, which is just kind of like an interesting choice for the way the animation goes. I'm sure it must be how it looks in the anime. By the way, that looks really good with the little sweep of the hand from Android 17, right? When he lifts his hand up and then sweeps it to the side, and his hair kind of follows suit as well. As you can see, like, his hair follows the motion of his arm sweep. That is super well done, if I do say so myself. I actually really like how that looks, and I think it has animation in all the right places to kind of make it feel impactful, right, in the motion, I should say. So we get a little bit of a little anime effect there on 17, and then this should be, yes, when they cut to Android 18's mouth. This must be how it is in the anime, because otherwise this is just such a weird, like, choice, I guess, right? We have Android 18 shout there, but then it's just her mouth for like 2 seconds. It's super short in the actual animation, and then it just cuts back to the same scene, right, of her standing there talking with 17 already having his arm out. I don't know, it just seems like a very weird intrusion, but I guess I don't mind it. Same thing with Android 18's arm movement and the hair, it looks really good. I will say you are going to notice a couple times in here their faces do look a little bit weird. I'll point it out in all the places that it is there. I feel like with her mouth closed it looks a lot more funky, but I'm not going to chalk that up to Dokkan as much, because the Tournament of Power definitely had a little bit of funky animation, right? In like the big moments of the Tournament of Power, it was animated super well, incredibly well, super memorable animation, super amazing looking animation that even a lot of it still holds up to today. But if you go back and watch the Tournament of Power, there are a lot of moments that have a little bit of wonky looking animation. I mean, a lot of DBS, unfortunately, does look that way now going back and looking at it. But I'm going to kind of chalk up the moments of weird face looking to them trying to make it look like the anime. Though, I will say, Dokkan has improved upon faces in the past, and that's always something strange to me that they don't do that sometimes. The other thing I will say is, again, this must be how it is in the anime, right? Because it's really weird to me with this animation, right? So they have 17 talking in the beginning, right? And then obviously he swipes his arm upward, right? They had in the very beginning, right? So obviously it was both of them standing there, and then it cuts to that shot of 17, right? Where he looks over, right? And closes his eyes. And then it's 17 talking, right? 17 swipes his arm, right? Whatever. And then I guess that's like the zoom in shot for 17, that beginning one there. Because obviously 18 gets the mouth zoom in, and then she raised her hand, and then it's like more zoomed in on her actual pose, right? For this, which I would equate to 17's part in the beginning. And then it kind of just zooms in on the both of them. I don't know, it feels like a little all over the place, but again, I get the feeling that this is how the anime did it, so I'm not gonna like, you know, dog on the Dokkan animation too much for that sort of thing, because I feel like that must just be the way that the anime did it, and it kind of just makes it look a little bit janky. Alright, so we now arrive at the super attack animation. Already, we are pointing out a funny looking face. What is wrong with 18's face? Oh my gosh. So, overall, it just looks really weird, but what is that nose, dude? This looks like somebody like, you know, when a kid is first learning how to draw anatomy and they draw the nose as like a little triangle, or more of like a simplistic animation style, or like artist style, like of like stick figures or something, I don't know. Or like some Diary of a Wimpy Kid type nose, bro. I don't know. It just looks very off-putting. But again, I'm going to chalk up stuff like this to the anime looking like this, and not necessarily Dokkan. Even 17 looks a little bit weird. I feel like it's like his back looks too big or something like that, but I feel like his face looks okay. We do have a little bit of the hair movement here, which is nice, as well as the fabric on the clothes too. The only thing I will say about this animation, right, that is a little bit weird, is it doesn't really feel like they're moving forward. Dokkan is really hit or miss when it comes to like characters moving in this way. I don't know, it's so weird to me, because sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, it looks like they're moving forward just fine, and I know it's supposed to be like the background is speeding behind them, but it kind of just looks more like sliding PNGs than characters actually flying forward. And I know what you're probably thinking, like, well yeah, no duh, that's because what it is, but it's supposed to be like the feeling that it envelops when you're watching it, right? Or the immersion, I guess, right? An animation should make me think, oh yeah, this is 17 and 18 flying forward, not me looking at two PNGs of 17 and 18, you know, moving across the screen. Alright, so we obviously have the card art pop up, which is so funny, bro, that Goku's there. I can't believe it, bro. Base Goku will always find his way into these animations somehow. So then we have both of them flying forward. Again, this is definitely a little yucky, and ironically enough, kind of reminds me of that one section of AGL Kale's animation where she was sliding forward. It is literally just two sprite PNGs of 17 and 18 flying forward, with them being tilted a little bit as they move across the ground. I really don't like it when Dokkan does this, because I know for a fact that they can do better, especially in 2023, bro, where we just saw some of the most insane animations of the year from Worldwide. And obviously, again, I understand that not every unit can be, you know, the new best animation in the game, but you can do better than this. This is some stuff that I would expect from an animation from like 3 years ago. Nonetheless, I do like that at least they do have a little bit of the wind-up on them, right? You can see that after they're done flying forward with just the static sprite. And I guess they do have 18's hair kind of flutter a little bit. 17's hair might be moving, but it's kind of hard to see because obviously it's a dark background and his hair is black. I think it is moving a little bit, though. It's kind of hard to tell, though. But here, right, you can see that they actually ready up for this attack right here. And then I do like this sequence of punches and kicks. This is pretty cool. Obviously, it's pretty rapid fire to, you know, sort of like represent the fact that obviously, you know, they're throwing it out super quickly. And I like the actual animation here, right, of kind of the stretching and smearing. and obviously the bit of perspective here with obviously, you know, them being kind of like far away from the camera, and then once their limbs are closer to the camera, they make the assets physically bigger to kind of give it that impact. And also it's just a cool looking scene with 17 and 18. And I like the last little bit of impact there, right, with the little bit of the yellow effects right here, right? You can see that they have this kind of like kapow, kapow, you know, kind of effect here, which I think definitely adds a little bit more, right? It's super simple of a thing to be there, and it's nothing that is like, you know, I guess insane or, you know, unheard of in other Dokkan animations, but I feel like it just definitely kind of ties the animation together well and makes it feel a little bit more impactful on those punches. So then you have the enemy obviously fly away, right? And then we have 17 jump up, which I think looks fine. Interesting shading, right, on the back of 17 there, but this animation right here, bro, so it's kind of interesting when I look at this, right? Because we have this super HD asset, and I appreciate at least the way that they do this with the assets, because sometimes what they do, if an asset will be farther away, they have the farther away one close up, and then it looks really bad, and then when it looks farther away, it looks fine. But here, they have this nice asset of 17, right, on the screen, with his hair moving a little bit, but when he actually begins to back up a little bit, right, you can see exactly where it transitions here. It transitions to a little bit more of a lower quality asset. And that's just kind of the way they have to do it because of, you know, how the game works. But once it obviously zooms out, right, it looks just fine, right, like this, right? There's nothing really, like, wrong there. But I appreciate at least if they're going to have this, like, close-up shot like this, that at least they have an HD asset for this. And they're not just having that one that you'll see, you know, like right here, super zoomed into the screen, because that would have looked disgusting, frankly. And maybe it's just because it's easy to draw, because obviously it takes up like the entire screen, right, the entire canvas, if you want to put it that way. But it's still nice that it's there nonetheless. And then obviously we have Android 17, right, charging up this Ki Blast, which I will say that is a nice way for them to not have to draw the Ki Blast actually forming in his hand, because, right, he just jumps up in the air, right, and you can't see the key yet. But then obviously the implication is that it's off screen growing in his hands before then obviously you can see it. And it's nice too, because as they cut back a little bit, it does kind of look like it grows for a second in his hand. So that's a cool little implication again of like it actually forming. The Ki Blast animation, I do like this transition. I will say this is kind of a little bit of just Tournament of Power Ki Blast syndrome. They all kind of just look like colored beams flying at each other rather than like energy actually swirling around in like motion of how it would really look, right? It does kind of just look like straight cylinder before it kind of expands on the side. I guess the way that it moves sideways, I do like that. But I do like this transition of having it kind of cover the screen before it cuts to the next part of the animation. I will say, this animation, this sequence right here, really reminds me of an animation from a couple years ago. I don't know if it's just because I believe the Tech 17 uses like the same attack as this, if memory serves. But this definitely looks like it could be a cut of animation from a Dokkan Super Attack from a couple of years ago, right? This does not look like a 2023 Dokkan SA to me personally. Either way, though, after 17 fires off the blast, we obviously have the blast make contact with the Mountain the River Amazon. And I do like that, you know, with this shooting there, right, it does kind of get a little bit smaller after, right? You can see that the beam actually growing and then, pew, you know, kind of the energy fading away and the little explosion effect on the mountain actually forming the way that it should look. Looks pretty good. We have the little rocks and dust come off. And then, of course, we have the step from Android 18, which I will say, I do like this little bit of animation, right? It's very simple, but it's cool to obviously imply speed, and, you know, Android 18 kind of jumping around there. As you can see here, right, with her jumping from side to side. Now, I'm not going to go too crazy on the animation on this part, right? Because obviously, this is so small, right, that it would be really hard to animate this. And granted, I've seen them do something similar before, right? Where I've seen them animate really, really small characters on the screen in Dokkan, and they do it quite well. But, I don't know, I think this works just fine. Obviously, it's a super small asset. I mean, I can't even really tell, like, where Android 18's head or feet are. It just looks, it almost kind of looks like Cat Dog, honestly, where it's like two heads on the side of, like, a pink blur. But there, it obviously changes to Android 18, like on the rock. And then, of course, they just kind of tilt the PNG a little bit, right? And kind of stretch it out a little bit before then having it just push off the rock. And then obviously changing to this one where they kind of stretch her a little bit. Look at that. She looks so funny like that, bro. She looks so stretched out. But yeah, obviously then when she lands on the rock again, right, it just kind of changes to another asset. But I think it's fine for small, you know, like scenes like that where the character is super tiny on the screen. And not to mention, right, I don't know how you would animate that like super well anyway because the character's just so far away. And not to mention, I suppose the quick movement also is another implication of speed. Nonetheless, we obviously have Android 18 fly forward, and you can see the moment that the asset changes, right? Here, it is definitely just a static PNG. And then we have here where obviously it changes into the one that you're going to see more close up in a second. Her arm does move, which is interesting, right? You can see obviously the arm kind of moves forward a little bit, and so does her shoulder before obviously coming towards the screen, which again is just a static PNG here, which they must just transition. I'm going to have to take a look at this when it actually like, you know, gets dropped in the assets, right, in the data download. But this asset obviously looks fine. But then when they zoom into her eye, this is like way too HD for this to have just been the eye from this PNG. So my guess is that they made a special one just for this. And then they had a little bit of a blur effect on another one for this close-up of her kind of going past the camera. We obviously then get closer to the enemy, which I will say, this is pretty cool. As strange as this does look kind of out of context, this is another first-person Dokkan moment, and I always like seeing these included in animations because they're just really cool, right? This is you as Android 18 flying up to Ribrianne, right? And then bursting through, you know, the big, like, I don't know what you would call that, like the illusion, right? Like the energy Ribrianne. Now, the thing that does kind of stink about this, right? And obviously punching through, like this looks okay, but it is just a PNG of 18 with her hair kind of moving a little bit, right? This might actually be the KO screen then too, which is pretty cool. I believe, because obviously when Ribrianne has the wings, usually in Dokkan that's like supposed to be the giant Ribrianne. I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be the scene where, you know, 17 and 18 are fighting the giant Ribrianne, like the giant energy one that she's making. And 18 blasts through the head of Ribrianne, I believe. And then the, you know, energy kind of like dissipates. And it is kind of a shame because obviously with the way that the Dokkan sprites work, first of all, it's not even targeting the correct area on Ribrianne's body for like recreating the scene, but also it just looks really jank and it's not as cool as it could be because in the scene, like Android 18's running up the, you know, the like key metaphorical, whatever you want to call it, like the giant Ribrianne, like ghost sort of thing, right? Like she's running up the arms, right? And like dodging all the attacks and stuff like that, right? Obviously, they can't really do that because, of course, the way that the Dokkan sprites work, like, it's not complicated enough to be able to, like, recreate that in an animation unless they just did that anyway, and it then wouldn't really make sense for some characters. Like, to be fair, it's really weird with the way that Dokkan does it. Like, sometimes they care about who the enemy sprite is, and sometimes they don't. Like, sometimes they just make the animation, like the animation is made for who the character would actually be fighting in that animation. And sometimes they try and make it more generic so that it could fit any of the enemy sprites. I don't know why they don't seem to pick a side. Like, I swear that sometimes they, like, go out of their way to make it so that it would fit any character. And then sometimes it's like, yeah, it's literally meant for this one character and the scene really only makes sense with them. But screw it, you just put any sprite in there and then there you go, right? I don't know. It's kind of weird that they didn't do it for this one because I feel like that would have made this animation a lot cooler. But then again, you know, I guess I respect, obviously, the aspect of game development of trying to make it work with every single character. But I digress. Unless this is from another punch and I'm just getting all this information wrong about this technically supposed to be the scene where, you know, she punches through the ghost Ribrianne. The Susanoo, right? I believe it would be called if we're talking, you know, anime terms, right, of Ribrianne. Unless it's not supposed to be that scene, you can definitely correct me in the comments on that if there's another scene where punching it, but every time she has the wings, that's supposed to be giant Ribrianne, so. Either way, let's move on now to the active skill. It's interesting because for the active skill animation, they really picked a scene that did not have a lot of action to it, which I think is kind of interesting, but I suppose it works because it is just a boost, right? It's not an attack. Now, I will say, I do feel like in here, a lot of the animation is pretty choppy, right? I think that this whole section of Android 18 lifting up her arm and then brushing her hair back, the hair animation itself, the arm animation, like bringing it down, right? It's all just very choppy. You can see the like, it almost kind of looks like an action figure with tight joints, right? Especially too when they change her head. Whoa, what is that, bro? The ghost of Android 18 passed. What is that face, bro? Again, I'm going to chalk this up to a little bit of a DBS L rather than a Dokkan L of them just trying to, you know, implement this closer to the anime. But I don't know how else they would have animated her, like, turning her head a little bit like this and opening her eye, but by golly, I wish there would have been a couple more frames in here, because not only is the animation drawing, the face that comes after is even worse. With 17, though, I think he looks fine for the most part, right? Obviously, he's just kind of looking forward, and then he turns his head. It is a little bit weird that they kind of just skip in the beginning, right? Like, they go from, if we keep our eyes on 17, right? His head turns, like, almost immediately, kind of, here, right? Like, his head does a lot more than just, like, a small turn, right? Like, they skip all the way to this point, but then they do small little bits of animation of him turning where it's almost like a little bit of rotoscoping, right? I don't know if it's just cutting corners or they have to just save money or something like that, but, like, bro, you're telling me they couldn't have had Android 17's head move just, like, an extra frame or two here to here, right? Because clearly here it looks like it's supposed to be, like, more fluid. I don't know, man. It's just very weird. His mouth moving looks fine, though, and obviously, as we move on from this scene, we then get the next part here, where I believe they cut, after Android 17 is done talking, to 17. It's kind of an interesting way that they cut this. First of all, that face is horrifying, but, so they go from, like, the face that 17 was talking to, right, where they begin to turn him a little bit, right? And he lifts his head like this. Again, I'm chalking this up to DBS. I'm not going to put this one on Dokkan's animation. But instead of, like, having him actually lift his head, right? When they cut to the next scene, he's already got his head lifted. I don't know if it cuts like this in the anime. Again, I'll have to see the animation comparisons between this one and what the anime actually looks like. But it definitely feels a little bit of a jarring one, too. I kind of feel like they could have just zoomed in on 17 instead. You know, like one past 18 or something like that. Regardless, though, that shot of 17 does look pretty cool, I will say. With him obviously having his eye kind of cocked to the side. And, oh, bro, I need an artist to, like, tell me how the anatomy of this head would work. Because if his hair is all the way back here, right? If his hair extends all the way back there, does that not mean his head is, like, in the shape of a football, but, like, his eyes and mouth are on, like, one side of the football, right? Like, if you sketch lines around this for where his hair would be here, right? Is his head not the shape of a watermelon? Like, dog, what is that? Anyhow, the change to it is also not great, right? Obviously, just kind of having that jump in this face, too. Oh, boy. I understand what they're trying to go for here. His hair shifting like that also looks super unnatural. It looks like a plastic, like a big plastic piece of hair on his head. Like it came from a Barbie doll, or like a plastic toy with like plastic hair, and it's not like a, you know, Barbie hair or something. As it's like moving, I don't know. It's just a very weird bit of animation here, and obviously they zoom into his face. Why did they zoom in that far? And what's so funny, too, is that, like, when it gets to here, I think this looks fine, right? With, like, the zoom in of his face. And they also do something interesting here, obviously, because this animation is meant to be seen, like, from this far away. As it zooms in, you can see the pixels get a little bit more crusty, right? Until they finally transition from here to here. And I think that this is fine, right? This is just enough animation in between these frames. But you can definitely see, like, the crustiness here go to the HD look there. Very interesting, though, if I do say so myself. And then, obviously, we cut over to Android 18 here, right? Kind of looking confused. And what's so funny to me is that, like, 17's faces look so wonky in this. But this looks, like, perfect to me. Like, this looks like exactly how Android 18 should look. And then, when it moves her head, though, right? Her head just kind of tilts, like... You can see this is just the PNG moving again. The hair kind of almost looking like plastic, like not really like hair. But then they just immediately changed to this face. I don't know. I feel like there should have been a little bit more like emotion changing in between there, right? And obviously to just kind of like squish her head into her jacket a little bit. There they do move her hair a little bit, which is nice, but I don't know why they didn't do it in the beginning of that animation. Regardless though, the close-up of 18 does look pretty nice, I will admit. And then the other thing I did want to mention, now that I'm looking at this shot more, right, where it's 18 just talking, I feel like her hair looks shorter in certain sections of this animation for some reason. Like, this is how it should look, right? Like, this is the, like, proper length, how it should be in the Tournament of Power. And, like, her hair looks fine, like, there, right? But I swear in the part where she was dashing forward, I guess it's the same enough there, but I swear in this part, right? Maybe it's just like a little bit of a trick of the eyes. I swear her hair looks shorter there. I guess it's just because her hair is like flaring up there. But I swear it just looks like a little bit like shorter cut. Especially with like how far away it is here. I swear her hair looks almost more like Gwen Stacy-esque style from Into the Spider-Verse and just Spider-Man in general, I guess, than this one does. I don't know. I feel like those two hairstyles look a little bit different. But anyway, definitely a little bit of nitpicking. After 18's done talking, though, we do have this very nice shot, which, by the way, this is the preview right here, right? If you were curious where the preview art came from for the Dokkan Fest, this is the shot right here. And then, obviously, you have them both step and go into their iconic poses from the Tournament of Power. Obviously, I know a lot of you will also say, oh, wow, it's the art from Dokkan, right? Which, I mean, like, yeah, of course, you know, the anime, you know, the Dokkan card art is taking the references from the anime of the poses, so of course it's going to look like that. But, of course, funny Dokkan brain rot leads us to believe, oh my gosh, it's LR17 right there. But anyway, I think this shot looks fine enough. The only thing that I don't really like is just the sudden pose change here. I wish there was like 1 or 2 frames. It doesn't help with the shading on them, right? Like the shading is a certain way here. And then you have these super harsh shadows like on the side of 17. That kind of doesn't really help on the eyes. I just wish there was a couple more in between that, because after that, this animation of them actually getting into pose, I think looks pretty good with them finally standing there. So yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely a little bit like kind of torn about how I feel about that active skill, right? It's not bad, and it is one of those active skills where just kind of standing talking, so it's not as much of like action packed, right? But it is kind of interesting just to see the way that they handled it. So now obviously we move on to the unit super attack. Let me take a drink of water real quick. Hydrate or dihydrate. Bro, that card art looks really cool with the both of them there, by the way. Holy cow. The Android 18 and 17 render look great. I hope we get those as individual story assets. Regardless, though, obviously with the unit super attack, right, the beginning part of the animation is exactly the same, right, with the both of them there. But the interesting part here is that they cut right here to the card art with Goku in it immediately, right? And then they immediately go to the part of the animation where it's the both of them dashing forward, and then you have the rapid fire punches and kicks, which are exactly the same, right? Before we get to that part, I remember I was mentioning before, like the little effects of them kind of going kapow, and a different scene of the mountain, right? It is definitely a little bit different, right? If we go back to, can we get it like right here? Oh, I guess it is the same mountain. Never mind. I take it back. I retract my statement on that. It is the same mountain. Interesting. I mean, I guess that makes sense, because I don't... Did this ever happen with Goku, what we're about to see? As well, the other interesting thing to note about the actual animation here, right? Oh, I actually didn't notice that. Okay, so I guess the card art is right after where they're actually dashing for it. I thought there was a little bit of something in between that. But yeah, so that part pretty much, right, is all exactly the same, right? Until you get to where 17 would jump up to then do the blast, where obviously here, right, you have the enemy fly into the mountain, and then you have 17 and 18 land with Goku jump scare coming in here, right? I will say 17 and 18's like initial like landing, I think looks fine here, right? Basically until they get to right here, right? When they're kind of like bringing their feet down and they're kind of like readying up a little bit, like I think that looks fine. But 17 just kind of like immediately go into the straight pose, and then 17 especially looks a lot more jarring, you know, with the shading on him, you know, half his body being darkened out, and then bam, right, full color. I don't know, it's definitely a little bit janky, right? Then we obviously have Goku come in and land, right, which his landing looks a little bit better. There is like one specific part where you can kind of see where, you know, this I think looks fine, right, and they kind of stretch his assets a little bit to make it feel a little bit more like a proper landing. His foot also is not flat on the ground there, but Going from this to this is definitely the jump that I'm like, oh. Now obviously we have Goku stand straight up and tall. This shot is pretty cool, though it's definitely not as good as the next one with Goku in the background and the two androids in the front. What is going on with 17's face? And 18 has a lot of like dark shadows. She looks tired of this, frankly. These definitely look a lot more like lower quality story assets with 17 and 18 in terms of like the style of them. Whereas Goku looks a lot more like a story asset or like a super attack asset to me. I don't know. But you do have this quick shot of the both of them before you have Goku powering up. I gotta say, this is definitely one of the weakest power-ups I feel like I've seen in terms of the pose, right? They literally just squash Goku's assets instead of actually animating him squatting, right? But I will say the individual assets here are super cool looking. This is definitely pretty yucky just going from this to this in one frame of him kind of glowing blue. Though base form hair and the look of Super Saiyan is always a kicker for me, so it does look pretty cool. The blue, excuse me, glow does look pretty nice. Like, this shot definitely looks pretty good. False Super Saiyan blue? Oh? That's pretty funny. But, nonetheless, obviously that looks pretty cool. It is a bit of a shame that this just kind of cuts to here, right? But I do like the way that the Super Saiyan blue looks, right? The hair is super spiked up and super long, actually. And obviously you can see as well the kind of blue aura glowing in the background, right? This shot does look pretty cool with obviously Goku kind of screaming up to the heavens there. They do cut this, right? So then they don't have to, you know, have Goku putting his arms down, right? They just cut from here to here. Interesting, they cut right where the text is. This shot, I will say, though, is very cool with Goku powering up and then obviously the androids raising their hands to then fire off some ki blasts. The only thing, again, I'm sure as soon as you saw it, you knew I was going to talk about it, right? Them raising their arms, I think, looks fine, but going from this to this is super jarring, and I don't even think it's as much of the pose change. It is definitely a little bit, but I think that's fine because obviously they're supposed to be like, you know, their arms are going out super quickly. But again, it's definitely the shading here that makes your eyes go, whoa, hello, right? Like the shading is here, but it's a little bit more minimal than this, which is a lot more darker tones, like especially on 18, right? There's a lot more bright on the pink jumpsuit than there is here. So I don't know, it is just a little bit jarring, but I do like the lighting effects here once the actual ki blast is formed in their hands, right? You can see that the shading actually changes from that, right? I do definitely like the way that that looks, and obviously their face is getting illuminated. This shot here is pretty cool, I will admit, with Goku in the background and them powering up. And then I will say it's weird because like the actual animation for a lot of these sections with Goku is a little bit janky, but I like a lot of the stills, honestly. Like this still of Goku is pretty cool. I would honestly love to see the Dragon Ball community do like a Dragon Ball redraw of this scene. I know a lot of people on Twitter, like different Dragon Ball artists and stuff like that, like to do redraws of this. I don't know, maybe I'll start doing that, bro, low-key, just to see if people would do it if I posted it, because I think it would be really cool to do redraws of some like different essay scenes from Dokkan. But I digress, right? This looks really cool. I like this like shot just alone, right? With obviously Goku charging the Kamehameha. The ki looks good. Goku himself looks good. I really like the angle as well the bright lines, right? The way that it kind of looks like burning energy almost, you know, it looks more like energy rather than, you know, just straight lines of blue color. And you can even see how it kind of makes like the edges, right, a little bit like more translucent. You can kind of see the clothes, which also makes them blue in the background. That looks good, right? Then we have them charge up their attack, which this shot looks fine, right? Obviously, it's just the both of them firing their ki blasts. I will say it is cool little detail that their hair actually does move here. It's very subtle, but it's there. And then Goku, this is a bit of an interesting shot, right? So we have Goku here, right? Very zoomed in, but obviously it's because the asset is about to zoom out. But they honestly just twist his head there, right? Like you can't see his body, and then they attach it to his body and just kind of twist it around a little bit. Again, I always don't really like when they do this, right? When they're kind of trying to twist around the Kamehameha and they skip way too many frames. Like going from this to this, there should definitely be a couple more things in between that. And then they obviously linger on this for a second, which again, like these individual assets look really good, right? Like I like the way that this looks, but we then zoom out a little bit, which looks pretty crispy. And honestly, I like the way that the blue glows on the edge of the Kamehameha there. But they do a good job, I guess, of kind of masking the scene where they, you know, have the light kind of cover up Goku. But I still feel like if they were going to do that, they should have had it like cover the whole screen and then gone to this, because this just looks a little bit too jarring. But again, like this individual shot of Goku looks pretty cool here. I like the like thickness of the lines, right, on the art. His hands do look a little bit lopsided now that I'm kind of looking at that. But either way, I still think it looks pretty cool. And I didn't even notice. His clothes do move a tiny bit. His clothes move like a slight bit there. It's really hard to tell, but they move a little bit. Like you can see that rip kind of moving and the part of his clothes there moving as well as his hair, obviously. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Then you obviously have the three of them blast in, which is pretty cool from the perspective of the lighting, right? Obviously, Goku being illuminated blue. The whole area mainly being illuminated blue because obviously Goku's attack is the most powerful, but you have the yellow light kind of illuminating the androids, and they have a little bit more of that color palette, so that's pretty cool. The beams kind of coming together, right? Again, very DBS-esque beam here, where the beams kind of just slide together, and then bam, it's just a straight line of a couple colors, like kind of rotating. This looks a little bit better, but definitely just kind of looks like a drill. Bro, this high key, this looks like Spiral Energy from Gurren Lagann with it looking a little bit more like green than blue, no cap. But yeah, that's kind of funny. Obviously then colliding into the enemy there. And I do like this end shot with obviously the beam going off the Tournament of Power stage and then dissipating at the end with the lighting effects actually kind of disappearing, right? And obviously returning to the green Tournament of Power stage. So that is everything for the androids animations here. Oh boy, how do I feel about this one, right? So again, like I said in the beginning of this video, it definitely feels like that these two kind of suffer from the 2023 monthly Dokkan Fest syndrome, where their animations are nothing crazy, but they're not bad, right? Like, basically everything in here, I don't even think, besides maybe the funny faces, but again, we're chalking that up to DBS, not to Dokkan. I don't even think there was anything in here for the animations that I said, like, was bad. I don't even really remember saying the word bad in this video. Like, there are some monthly Dokkan Fests that, sure, I will say their animations are actually bad. Like we were talking about AGL Kale earlier. Like, she is actually bad, right? I think these are just more mediocre, is the best way to put it, right? They're just kind of if you will, right? They're nothing too crazy, you know, they're nothing too impressive, but they're nothing that makes me go, yuck! Maybe besides Android 17's face coming up in about 2 seconds here. But besides that, right? I don't really think that, you know, they're anything crazy, but they're definitely not bad. So definitely let me know what you think in the comment section below. I would be very curious to hear your thoughts on these guys. I do still think that they are pretty cool overall, and it is definitely nice to get a Tournament of Power 17 and 18. I know we have definitely been waiting for more Tournament of Power stuff as of late, so this is quite exciting that we are getting more Tournament of Power units, you know, in the roster for Dokkan. So definitely let me know if you are looking forward to these guys. Let me know if you are planning on summoning, and let me know again what you think of these animations in the comment section below as well. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and let me know if you enjoyed these funny guys, because honestly, I think I like their animations the best, ironically enough. They're very simple, they're very goofy, and they're a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for watching, though. I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.